Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have long been a topic of debate and regulatory scrutiny worldwide, and Nigeria has been no exception. In February 2021, the Central Bank of Nigeria issued a circular to deposit money banks, non-bank financial institutions, and other financial institutions to close accounts of persons or entities involved in cryptocurrency transactions within the banking system. The Central Bank further warned that local financial institutions against dealing in crypto assets or facilitating payments for crypto exchanges. The Central Bank cited concerns over money laundering, terrorism financing, cybercrime, and the volatility of cryptocurrencies as reasons for the ban. However, just 2 years later, the government has taken a surprising turn by introducing taxation on cryptocurrencies. Joining me live now here in our Lagos studios is the technology and corporate commercial attorney at Chris Ogunbanjo LP, Peter Cole Onele. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Very interesting conversation on this today, just as we're looking at what the US SEC is doing with Binance and Coinbase, and maybe you're going to touch upon that as we move on this conversation. But let's talk about the Finance Act 2033, which President Buhari signed just before he left office. And there's a capital gains tax now on cryptocurrencies and other digital assets. Does that pile into the existing capital gain tax in securities trading, whether you're the bonds, you're the air stock market, and what have you? What's the legal word around this in your industry right now?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the very good start point will be to say that the Finance Act as an enactment, which the immediate past President Muhammadu Buhari, signed into law on May 28th, just before he departed office, amended several legislations. But key of those legislations were several fiscal reforms they made to our tax laws, as you mentioned, sir. Now, primarily, one key amendment which we are discussing now is the amendment to Section 2. The amendment that was made effect by Section 2 of the new Finance Act, which actually amended Section 3A of the Capital Gains Tax Act. Now, previously, under the regime of the old Capital Gains Tax Act, what is termed as assets that are taxable for the purpose of capital gains tax were only incorporeal property, debt, options, and the usual shares as we know them. But with this new amendment, there is now the introduction of the term and digital assets to that provision of law, which now means that effective from the date of that legislation, digital assets are now deemed to be taxable, and gains upon them are charged at the rate of 10%. Now, this brings to fore a couple of questions. One would have thought that if such legislation will be passed, there will be clarity as regarding, first, the definition of what digital assets connote under law. But unfortunately, as it stands, there is no provision in either the Finance Act itself, nor in the Capital Gains Tax Act, which is sought to amend, which defines what digital assets is. So basically, we're left with consulting perhaps other jurisdictions where there are more advanced frameworks for cryptocurrency and digital assets generally. But interestingly enough also is the fact that in terms of policy shift and the position of the government, it seems as if, like you mentioned, CBN over the course of the past year has taken it upon itself to introduce punitive measures against banks who refuse to close down accounts of people who were trading in cryptocurrency. Yes. So this shows that the approach thus far has been prohibitive. And if we have had this prohibitive approach to date, and suddenly we have risen up to the day.
Well, what the central bank said back then was, look, you can't do crypto exchange in my territory, and banks should not do that. But you can do that wherever you want. Definitely. So there's still a lot of folks in Nigeria doing Binance, Coinbase, and whatever. It's just that you can route it through the Nigerian banking system. But if you're going to do that within my space, where the Finance Act is saying, look, we need money, we need tax, so we're going to tax you, whether you're doing it within the banking system locally or not, but we've got to tax you at whatever digital asset. Now, the central bank went ahead to introduce its own e-naira, which is a digital asset. Exactly. So if you have a digital wallet of the Central Bank of Nigeria, that will be taxable. That's what this new Finance Act is saying.
Yeah, that's correct, sir. That's correct. Yeah. The understanding that when we say digital assets, we're not only talking about cryptocurrency, we're talking about non-fungible tokens, NFTs, we're talking about crypto, we're talking about central bank-based digital currency, like you mentioned. For instance, the e-naira itself is a form of digital assets. So all of them in totality, under the framework of this new law, are now taxable, which is indeed, in a sense, it is a welcome development, because we have long talked about the need for Nigeria to explore other viable means of revenue. And taxation is a very, very viable one. So looking into that segment, and understanding that in terms of future prospects on the economic valuation of the crypto industry, it is one that has gains for the economy of the country.
Because again, you've got exchanges such as the NESD over-the-counter looking at digital assets coming soon. And if that is onboarded, the NESD over the OTC exchange, maybe this Finance Act is beginning to look at that, because that could just be a boom. If you look at that coming on board. But again, like you said, there has to be further clarity. So President Buhari signed it. So do you think the new finance minister, which President Tinubu will appoint or whatever, will need to table this Finance Act once again before the new president, but perhaps for a few reconfiguration, and then it can move on? Do you think that will be necessary?
Well, I do think that, like I mentioned earlier, there is need for clarity regarding the implementation of the law. The law itself has been written already, but more often, as we see in other climes like the US, for instance, the US IRS had made a policy statement as far back as 2014, clarifying that, first, digital assets were deemed to be property, and based on that, taxes will be paid clearly. And then later on, it released a set of frameworks trying to clarify how that will be implemented. So there's a necessity for the FIRS, for instance, in Nigeria.
So even as we speak today,
definitely.
The FIRS, you just clarify.
Yes, definitely.
For everyone.
Yeah. And that clarification is also very necessary because it then gives a perspective, puts into perspective the position of the government itself. And like you mentioned, the new administration itself has said part of the ways in which it hopes to achieve economic growth is by expanding the tax base. Clearly, this is another opportunity to do that.
I love that, and again, as quickly as possible, the FIRS should do what you advise, because that gives a comfort to everyone very quickly to know whether you're breaching the law, whether you're paying tax. Because again, if you're the one collecting the tax, you will have to clarify what constitutes what you want to tax me upon. It's going to be very clouded there if it's all allowed to go on. Then we've got to discuss that much later. Let's talk about the ChatGPT, GPT and tech. Who owns the copyright of such information provided by ChatGPT?
Well, that question is a bit of a complex question, right? Complex question because in determining the ownership of the intellectual property that is created by ChatGPT. Now, the first question is usually whether the machine itself, the artificial intelligence, which ChatGPT represents, can be deemed to have the capacity of owning any information that it releases. Now, that answer itself was provided by the ChatGPT itself. If you put that question to ChatGPT, the response is that it by itself does not own that intellectual property. Then the next question is, can it be deemed that OpenAI, which is the owner of ChatGPT, is the owner of all the information? Again, OpenAI itself has answered that question by saying, when it comes to inputs to ChatGPT, say for instance, you've asked a question to the chatbot and you want to get an answer. The person who asked the question, the person who is the one who is making that input, as to that extent, to the extent of his own originality. For instance, if the question you're asking yourself is sourced from somewhere, that person who had the original information still retains the ownership. Yeah. But just to say that as point of law, none of these questions have been significantly or fundamentally answered. They're not settled yet. So these are just basically legal opinions regarding how this will play out. But as things begin to unfold, the world has come to realize that AI is here to stay. New technology is definitely a part of our day-to-day life. And we also have to rise to the occasion by ensuring that frameworks are in place to protect people's privacy and data as well.
We're going to be clearing this up as we go. Let's talk about the 5G technology, and SEC saying this will create about 22.3 million jobs and yielding about $18.2 trillion economic globally. You think is that ambitious?
Well, that's very ambitious, actually. That's very ambitious. Now, again, understanding that the way the world advances, as time changes, so the societies advance, so the opportunities get to be created. In terms of 5G technology itself, its potentials are limitless. It is said that it affects advancement in every sector of the economy. Elsewhere, we've heard of several innovations in terms of improvements in treatment of cancer, of other serious ailments that we thought could not be addressed. But 5G is here to address all that. So it is hoped that from a national perspective, if we adopt that vantage point of being positive in ensuring that we enable innovation in that respect, That's the first thing we have to do. We can't just create target and say we want to achieve 23 million jobs or get this certain without ensuring that we put frameworks in place. So it is a very, very ambitious goal, but it's one that is attainable if the frameworks are in place to ensure that that is met.
Okay, so we just also, instead of just banding figures around, perhaps we should just look at what is being done first.
Definitely.
Before we do all that. So the protesters in Senegal have been shut down due to whatever. Is that against human rights, or do you think government is trying to do what they call the containment of information to prevent the spread of protests, perhaps violence and all that?
The first thing to note is that people have the freedom to protest first, but again, to every right or a freedom, there are always limitations as well. So to the extent people
from a legal point of view,
but understanding that the recommendation has always been that at any point at which government is forced to want to resolve such situations or such disruptions, it should never result into any action that will take away the fundamental human rights or the freedom of the people. You can place restrictions on movement, for instance. That is a necessity in such situations. But then shutting down the internet is akin to absolutely removing the right of people to express themselves, which is fundamentally enshrined and globally recognized.
Interesting situation, but again, sometimes it's a fine line in law and in practice.
Definitely,
again, that's where it all comes. Thank you so much, Peter Cole, Onele, Technology and Cooperative Company at Chris Ogunbanjo LP. Thank you, and this is for your weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We appreciate your coming.